I'm Holly.
I'm Leslie.
And we would be dead. Leslie.
Hey, Holly.
Hey, Fiends. It's a Leslie episode.
Oh my God, what?
Yay! So, Leslie, tell us what you have for us today.
Sure. So I am doing the case of the Career Girls murder and the case against George Whitmore Jr.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this case, when I first looked into it, which was years ago, I didn't see like a lot of information about it. I was more like interested in George Whitmore in general. But then when I got back to it, I realized that there were a few more podcasts that had started to cover it. So
interesting.
Yeah. So there was a couple that did like longer, like two-parters for this. So I thought, well, why not make this a TLDR?
Yeah, we'll give you all the information you need. So when people talk about it at parties, you're not behind.
Sure.
Everybody talks about the Career Girl murders.
Everybody.
All the people.
They will now.
Yeah, they can.
Mm-hmm.
And guys, I know next to nothing about this case. I'm sure that I listened to some podcast coverage or another at some point in time.
I don't know that you would have.
Maybe I didn't.
Because the one that you might have, they just covered it.
And I don't really listen to them anymore.
No.
So, no, I guess I wouldn't have. When you said you were going to cover it, though, I stopped looking for it. I purposefully didn't listen to anything about it at that point because I was like, oh, I want to be surprised. I want to get the full experience.
Yeah.
So
you want to get the Leslie experience.
I do. So you guys out there in listening land, I'm with you this time. I'm probably going to be surprised. Sometimes I think I don't know a case and then I do. So you never know what's going to happen. But this week I did. I just let go and let God. And I am not super good at that. I just really like being in control.
Sure.
So sitting on my hands this week had me a little stressed out. I may have pulled out my hair a little and picked at my face a little bit for the past week.
Yikes.
So it hasn't left me looking super great.
Mm-mm.
No, it's not great. And I've tried everything to bring my complexion back to life. Well, everything short of sleeping and drinking more water because who has that kind of time?
No. What?
Not me. That's crazy.
Is that a thing?
Some people think it is, but it's not. You're fine. But none of the things I tried seemed to work. But I have heard of one magical ingredient that supposedly will revive your complexion in just seconds.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. And that ingredient is just a little pinch of
validation. A hill worth dying on.
Yes. Amen. This is going to be a good one.
Yeah.
And best of all, Fiends, you can give us that priceless ingredient totally free of charge.
Shut the front door. Tell me how.
But how? You must be asking yourself.
Every day.
Me too, all the time.
At least once a week.
At least. Well, you know what? I will tell you. Simply head on over to Spotify or Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star rating and or a friendly review. It really is the only way to move this podcast forward. Ratings and reviews equal attention. Attention equals support. And support equals more and better content for all of you.
Wonderful.
I know, right? But if you just cannot wait for more We Would Be Dead in your life, don't worry. You don't have to. You can support us over on Patreon. Thank goodness there was extra. There, for just a few dollars a month, you will gain access to our entire catalog of 30-minute horror movies, our special minisodes, our weekly after show, Host Mortem, which is available in both video and audio formats. Maybe you want to see our faces. Maybe you don't. Both are okay, but why not see our faces?
Yeah, why not?
You can. So that'll be good.
Sure.
You'll also get a special gift in the mail from us. Opportunity to participate in giveaways, merch deals, and on-air toast dedicated just to you and more. And spooky season is just around the corner. Yeah, so maybe we'll do some fun stuff for patrons there for that. I don't know. Do you know?
I don't.
No. It sounds fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We will have more exclusive content coming up in the works for you, our beloved patrons. But if you have anything you'd like to see, never hesitate to let us know. In all honesty, we are here thanks to our patrons, so come on over and be part of the We Would Be Dead family.
Yeah.
It's nice over there.
Sure is.
And if all of that is a little too much for you, you can simply follow us on social media. We are at Would Be Dead Pod anywhere and everywhere you get your content. You can like our posts, share our posts, and share our posts.
Love that one.
It's the best one. You can leave us a comment, post about your favorite episode, let us know when you're listening, tell a friend, tell a neighbor, tell...
Ooh, your work bestie.
Ooh, flipping the script this week.
It's my week.
It is your week, your work bestie. And a name we haven't used. Let's see.
Not so easy, is it?
I never said it was.
Your brain just goes blank.
I know. I'm like, who did I work with ever?
You know what? I normally see a face and then my brain just stops working sometimes, but I see a face.
I'm going to say Maureen.
Oh, okay.
She's like someone you'd work with.
Sure.
Maybe gossip. So
yeah.
hi. You might want to gossip a little bit or vent about your day.
They always want the tea.
Well, then definitely a good pick.
Yeah.
Tell Maureen.
Tell her right now.
Then your friends and Maureen can become fiends and we can all hang out together.
Wonderful.
I think that's all I have in the way of news before we begin. Leslie, do you have anything to add before you begin?
Well, Holly,
yes.
I do have one thing. On with the show. Let me take you back to the early 1960s, where we are getting into the era of the feminist and civil rights movements. This was a time for change and for equality. And for women, it was about the right to have some autonomy. One of many changes we saw from the feminist or women's movement, that as it was called back then, specifically was seeing more women getting a higher education and choosing to pursue careers rather than husbands and kids right out of school or college.
Get it, girls.
Yeah. This also meant young women were moving out on their parents, or this also moving out of
see your parents.
Bye. This also meant young women were moving out of their parents' homes and into their own spaces. We're starting strong.
I love it.
So they were moving into their own spaces without a man, you say? How queer? Well, not always, but sometimes, yes.
Maybe queer.
Maybe. So we are in Manhattan in the Upper East Side, to be exact.
Definitely maybe queer. Okay.
Yeah.
Continue.
This is Gossip Girl land.
Love it.
For $250 a month, 23-year-old Patricia Toll secured a rental in apartment 3C on the 57th East 88th Street.
Ooh.
Patricia was the daughter of Winton and Patricia Tolles. Her father, Winton, was the dean of Hamilton College in New York from 1947 to 1972. So 25 years this man was the dean.
That's a good chunk of time.
And it's a good job.
That is a good job.
Right?
Yeah.
And shout out to our fiend, Kara. She used to work at Hamilton College.
Oh, cool. Okay, little connection there. Love it.
As a teenager, she made what she described as a grand mistake. And this is, so I got this.
Haven't we all?
Haven't we all? So I want to say I pulled this directly from her. She has since passed.
Oh.
I pulled this directly from her Find a Grave, obituary thing.
A grand mistake.
Yes. So as a teenager, she made what she described as a grand mistake, telling her parents she had been invited to fraternity house parties because she lived on this college campus, right? She soon found herself whisked away to the Emma Willard School, an all-girls boarding school in Troy, New York. While attending the Emma Willard School, she was the vice president and the school council for the 1957 to 58 school year. In April of 1958, she was one of 12 Emma Willard students awarded for outstanding qualities of character and citizenship. After high school, she went to Smith College, which is a women's liberal arts college. I was going to say,
also all girls.
Yes, in Northampton, Massachusetts. Despite her parents sending her away to all girls schools, Patricia always felt like the Hamilton campus was home, and is also where she met her boyfriend, David Smalley, who she ended up marrying.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Get it, girl.
So during the summer of 1963, Patricia moved into the Upper East Side apartment with 2 other girls, 23-year-old Emily Hoffert and 21-year-old Janice Wylie. Patricia met Emily while at Smith College, where they were roommates. Emily had gone off to Tufts University to get her master's in English and secured a job as an elementary school teacher on Long Island.
Okay.
Before moving to New York, she was living at home with her parents, Ruth and Dr. Henry Hoffert, in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Her father was a surgeon, so he also made very good money. She had planned to only stay with the girls for a few weeks until she moved into her new place on Long Island before the school year started. So she had been in Massachusetts for a while. Then she went home to her parents for a couple of weeks. And then she was like, I need to get back. I need to go to the city. I need to be somewhere. So she came back to the city and her friend Patricia was just like, you can stay with us for a couple of weeks till the place that's closer to where your school is going to be. She had other girlfriends that were getting an apartment in Long Island.
Makes sense.
So she was just crashing there for a couple weeks. Patricia and Janice's father knew each other from college. So this is the other girl, 21-year-old Janice Wylie. Their fathers had known each other. Janice was the daughter of Max Wylie and Isabel Lamb. Max Wylie was a writer, radio and television producer, director, and editor. He was best known for his shows The Flying Nun, that starred Sally Fields, The Wide Wide World, and Omnibus. Janice also wanted to work in television and on Broadway, but as an actress, and she had already done more than 20 plays at the nearby theater in town.
Oh, okay.
So she is a New York girl as well. She did live in Massachusetts for a little while, but she grew up in New York. So this is her town.
Okay.
And this apartment that they're living in is 5 bedrooms.
What?
5 bedrooms.
Do you know how much that would be now?
I know.
A 5-bedroom apartment in New York?
$250 was a lot of money then, too. A month for these girls to be paying.
I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, you do get to split it between 5 girls, which is good. But
no, it was just 2 of them.
In 5? Oh my God, that's blowing my mind.
It's only 3 people, and I doubt that Emily is even paying that much because she's only there for a couple weeks.
Oh my God. Wow. Okay. All right. I was thinking maybe we just didn't talk about the other roommates.
No.
Nope.
All nope.
Right. Sorry if you hear my dog. He's on my lap, and they're being really bad right now, so I have to hold him.
So Max and Isabel, Janice's parents, also only lived a couple of blocks away from the girls' apartment. So they were literally 2 blocks away.
Oh, okay.
On 55th Street
That's
instead
convenient.
of 57th. Yeah. So this is key because when the girls were looking for an apartment, they decided to pick this one because Janice had grown up here and knew that it was a good neighborhood where nothing bad ever happened.
Until now.
Mm-hmm. And then something else to mention too, these girls, they're all beautiful, but Janice is the one that is the
blonde one. I'm looking at pictures of them.
Bombshell. She has green sparkling eyes. That is how she will always be referred to as Janice Wylie, the blonde bombshell with gorgeous green eyes, whereas Emily Hoffert is the one with glasses.
Oh no, she does have glasses, but that's not nice.
She's the one with glasses.
Oh, bummer. This was apparently a made-for-TV miniseries too.
Yeah, they did make something.
And she looks real fancy in this miniseries.
So all of them are well-educated. I would say Janice is the one that is more like the socialite. She's she's just the one that goes out all the time, and she's always on dates.
She's a cool girl.
She's always doing stuff. Emily is a little bit more reserved, is more focused on career-oriented tasks. She wants to be a teacher. That's her passion. I also believe that she might have had a boyfriend too.
And glasses?
I'm not sure. But Patricia did have a boyfriend. So she was like, I have this man, I'm good, but I'm also working on my career. Right?
Got it. Okay. We respect it.
Sure. Just a lot of really fun personalities in this house.
Yeah.
So on the morning of August 28th, 1963, the girls were all up in the morning getting ready for their day. And that fact there is also possibly that changes sometimes. Sometimes Janice is still sleeping. Sometimes she's up just having a day.
Okay.
But either way, they're all home. And they all know that they're home.
Good.
By 9 a.m., Patricia was out the door, headed to her job at the book division in Time Life International. Patricia states that upon leaving the apartment, she stopped to listen for the click that indicated their apartment door was locked. Janice, who worked for Newsweek, as a news researcher, wasn't due in to work for a couple of hours. She wasn't due until like 11 a.m. So she was just taking her damn time. Emily didn't have work that day because, she didn't start her job yet, but had plans to drop off some of her belongings at her new place on Long Island. So she was going to be out and about all day. She also had a car. She had used somebody else's car to like transport some items. So she was going to return it. And then from there, maybe go to the apartment. It was just like nobody really knew what her plans were for the day, but she was just out doing her own thing.
Do your thing, girl.
Mm-hmm. This was also the day that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was in D.C. giving his I Have a Dream speech.
Oh, okay.
So this was a big day.
Yeah.
And actually, Janice was actually supposed to be going to that, like with some work friends.
Oh, wow.
But some plans had changed last minute, and so she was due to go into work at 11. So Patricia gets to work at around sometime after 9 a.m. In the early afternoon, Patricia gets a call from Mrs. Wylie, Janice's mom, and she tells Patricia that she received a call from Janice's work saying that she had not shown up that day.
Oh, this is never a good sign.
Pat said that she would let her know if she hears anything.
Good.
After work, Patricia headed straight home. She arrived at her apartment complex at 6:40 p.m. where she greeted her doorman and headed up to the 3rd floor. She unlocked the door to 3C and was immediately aware something was wrong. The apartment had been ransacked. She is quoted saying, "I found the whole place in a mess. The apartment was terribly upset and I couldn't find my roommate." Pat, I know. Pat noted, and sometimes I might call her Pat because they sometimes call her Pat.
Cute.
Pat noticed the service exit in the kitchen was opened, which was strange because she remembered closing that for sure. The service exit is where they had a direct access to like where they could take out the trash and stuff. And it was like a private area. It wasn't like it was just outside in the back alley. It was like enclosed too. So she remembers having taken out the trash that morning and coming back in and locking it. And these were all things that like as single women or living on their own, like they constantly did these things and checked like doors and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it was weird to her that was opened. She went down the hall toward the bedroom that she shared with Janice. They have 5 bedrooms, but they share
Oh my God. Maybe they're nervous living in the city by
which
themselves.
Is fine.
Or they just want to like have slumber parties.
It's adorable.
That is cute.
And she was frightened to see how chaotic it was when she looked in the bedroom. Dresser drawers were open with clothes spilling out. Items had been pulled from the closets and there were papers scattered everywhere. It wasn't until she looked into the bathroom that she had really started to panic. Lying on the bathroom sink was a knife covered in blood. Ooh. She ran out of the apartment and used the hall phone to call Mr. Wylie. He was on his way over. After getting off the phone with him, she called the cops and then waited downstairs in the lobby. It also is said that she, when she called the Wylie household, the mom picked up because, she's like waiting for Janice to call. And she actually asked to speak to Mr. Wylie before she tells like anything that's going on. Ooh, okay. She like doesn't want to say anything to her mom about it.
That would make me so uneasy though too when she'd be like, why do you need to talk to him?
I know. Ugh. And at this point she sees that knife and one of her first thoughts is like maybe she killed herself, maybe Janice killed herself or something. So Mr. and Mrs. Wylie arrived before the police because they were so close. Mr. Wylie told his wife and Pat to stay put and wait for the police while he went into the apartment. He noticed the kitchen looked messy and saw some blood in a few different items. He then saw the bedroom that Pat had already informed him about. However, she hadn't told him that there was a large blood stain on the mattress closest to the window. And she just didn't see it. She was just too she looked in the room, saw how messy it was, and then was just like, that. And then saw the thing in the bathroom. A lot of stuff she just like doesn't take in because she's like so scared.
That makes sense though.
Mm-hmm. So he cautiously made his way into the room toward the mattress. As he got to the foot of the bed, he discovered the bloody bodies of his daughter Janice and Emily tied up in a small space between the bed and the wall.
Oh.
And here's where it gets really graphic. So this is a little
warning.
Bit. Yeah. Janice was face up on the floor. She was naked and she had been stabbed so many times that her intestines were pulled out from inside her stomach.
Oh my God.
Emily was
That's angry.
I know. Emily was found on her side, lying next to and facing Janice. Emily was fully clothed and had been clearly stabbed in the neck, pretty much like she looked like she was almost decapitated.
Ugh.
Both girls were individually bound and gagged, and then also bound together with long strips of cloth that appeared to have been cut from a bedsheet.
Ugh.
Mr. Wylie grabbed a blanket and laid it across the girls and then returned to his wife and Patricia. He was just like...
Yeah.
Right? Such a, like, to be a dad and to see that.
I can't.
I know.
That would be awful.
It was so sad.
That's really sad.
Police entered the scene and began their investigation. Some items found near the bodies were razor blades, 3 glass soda bottles, one of which had been broken, and an open jar of Noxzema cream.
No.
Police also noted that Janice's clock was broken and the time had stopped at 10:47 a.m.
This is so similar in a lot of ways to the soap sculpture one.
Oh, yeah.
Just like the clock was a thing and like, I don't know, it just like feels similar to me.
Yeah.
Maybe it isn't totally, but
some of this stuff does feel very similar.
Yeah.
In the same room on top of the radiator were 2 broken carving knives covered in blood. The blades had been snapped off and were lying next to the women. They also found a 3rd knife in the bathroom,
God.
the one Patricia had seen.
Ugh.
All 3 knives had come from the kitchen, so they were like from inside. We would learn a short while later from the medical examiner that Janice was also sexually assaulted. And she had that Noxzema cream all over her.
Oh, God. I mean, I wonder why.
So, the police couldn't figure out how the killer got into the apartment. There was no evidence to suggest that they came in through the front door because it had been locked and the lock showed no signs of being tampered with. Patricia specifically remembered locking the service entrance that morning after she had used it to take the trash out, and locking and bolting the door was a routine. However, it was clearly opened at this time, so the killer may have at least used it to escape. There was a window open, but they were on the 3rd floor and there was no fire escape, so it seemed pretty unlikely. Assuming there was no forced entry, detectives started to think that maybe the killer was a familiar face, someone the ladies may have invited in.
Yeah.
And because this was a fairly big profile case, like a lot of the different precincts in the area, they all sent like 2 or 3 other officers to like help on this case. So based on the evidence that they compiled and what all the detectives were like going through, they were able to deduce that Janice was at least knocked out on impact from a soda bottle that had hit her so hard it fractured her skull. She had no defensive wounds and she was stabbed over 60 times. So it was pretty much like she got knocked out and then she was just out.
Yeah, it's almost like when someone is sleeping.
Yeah. But stabbed over 60 times.
That's angry. That's really angry. Nobody just stabs someone over 60 times casually.
I believe she was stabbed like 7 times in the heart and then a whole bunch in the stomach. Emily was found to have defensive wounds, which means that though she was also hit over the head with a soda bottle, that she wasn't knocked unconscious. She was stabbed in the throat repeatedly, but not as many times as Janice. The fact that Emily wasn't even supposed to be there that day and that she was not sexually assaulted, police pretty confidently began to think that it was either a burglary gone wrong or one of Janice's like ex.
It was a targeted attack.
Yeah, it was,
I bet they immediately were like, she attracts all the boys. And so she just slutted it up.
Yeah.
See, it is like the soap one.
So when detectives found a little green address book in Janice's dresser drawers, they began calling down the list of potential current or ex-lovers. And they also created a tip line and more than 1,000 leads were followed up on. Mr. Wylie did tell detectives that he thought his daughter did date a lot. He wasn't like upset about it. He was just like, she goes out, you know, like I've met some of these people. I'm not always fond of the guys that she chooses, but I can't think of one particular guy that could do something like
there's
this.
No like, there's that Bobby. He's always talking about stabbing people.
Exactly. And many of them were actually still friendly with her too. So he was just like, they're just, you know, she's just 21 and having fun. You know, I don't know who would do this. Mr. Wylie did tell police that for several weeks prior to his daughter's murder, though, that she had been receiving threatening phone calls while at work.
Okay, that's noteworthy.
Detectives, unfortunately, could not make a link. Like, there was no link there.
Come on.
They did.
That's because they probably didn't want to think that. They were just like, no.
No, they did. So there is like some, again, this is too long, didn't read, right?
Right.
So they do go through certain suspects, especially in her book. And there are some that they kind of like, that they do follow up on, but nothing like leads anywhere. Everything is like a dead end. And even with the calls, like they may have found somebody that could have been doing the calls, but they were almost like prank calls, and it was annoying, and I don't know why they were doing them.
Yeah, and it's the 60s. We can't like really trace calls well.
Yeah. So months went by and no arrests had been made, like months, nothing. And Newsweek put out a $10,000 reward for anyone with information that could lead to the killer. And Newsweek is like the place that she worked at.
Yeah.
Then on the morning of April 14th, 1964, in Brownsville neighborhood of Brooklyn, a neighbor with a ground floor apartment looked out his window and saw what looked like a woman lying unconscious in a pool of blood.
Oh.
After police arrived, it was reported that the victim's name was Mrs. Minnie Edmonds. She was the mother of 5 and was accosted by a man who tried to grab her purse around 3 a.m. She had been out with her bestie enjoying a girls' night out when the two split off around 2 a.m. to head home. She must have noticed that she was being followed, so she ran into the basement of an apartment house, but was caught and dragged into the alley, stabbed 4 times with a penknife, and was sexually assaulted.
Oh, Minnie.
Oh. 9 days later, and that's that. They're like currently like police were trying to investigate.
Yeah.
Like nothing was coming up at this point. 9 days later, on April 23rd, a 20-year-old nursing student, Elba Barrera, reported an attempted rape. She was walking home from work on Sutter Avenue at about 1:20 a.m. And this was just like 1 block away from where Minnie was killed. So while she's walking down the street at 1:20 a.m., a black man jumped her from behind, placed her in a headlock, and told her to quote, "Stay quiet. I'm going to rape and kill you."
Mm.
You know. And so she thought, well, if you're going to kill me anyway, why not fight? So,
yeah, I mean, you just said.
Mm-hmm. So she fought back and started to scream, causing the suspect to run away. Close by was a New York City police officer, Frank Isola, who heard the screams and saw the suspect fleeing. He fired a couple of shots and chased him on foot for 3 blocks before losing him. Elba told officers that her attacker looked black and in his early 20s, about 5'9" and 160 pounds. She also pulled a button off of his jacket. And it should be noted that Elba's description of her attacker was very similar to Officer Isola's description as well. So, like, they both gave their descriptions separately. And so when looked at, they're just like, oh, yeah, these are like the same. Okay.
Okay.
So Officer Isola went back out on the streets looking for the suspect. Like he went in, made his statement, and then was just like, it's a little lighter out. I'm going to like go back and see. He was hoping that he would see maybe some blood marks somewhere because he thought maybe he had hit the attacker with the gun, right?
Sure.
So he came across, like while out, he came across a young black man outside the laundromat on Sutter Avenue. His name was George Whitmore Jr., and he was 19 years old. After some questioning, George told the officer that he had slept at the laundromat last night and that he did hear the gunshots and that he even interacted with someone running away from the police looking for a place to hide. But George said, no way, buddy, you're on your own.
Fair enough.
And then that was that. But George was like very happy to help. He was just like, I saw this man, he went this way. Like I'm glad I can tell somebody. But also I didn't want to like go out of my way because it's not great for me either.
Yeah, of course.
So George told the officer that he was staying at the laundromat, but that he was waiting for his brother to come by to pick him up. And then they were going to a nearby salt mine to do some day laboring stuff.
Good times. In the salt mine.
Yes. After chatting with George, Officer Isola headed back to the precinct where an officer working on Minnie Edmonds' case overheard him mention George and thought there might be a good chance George would have heard or seen something the night that Minnie was killed because it was right around the corner. Maybe he was there. And at this point, they didn't have really any witnesses to anything. So the officers went to the salt mine to find George, but the owner said that there was no George on his staff.
Oh, no.
And this led the officers to wonder if he's lying about this, what else is he lying about? So they headed back to the laundromat to see if George was still there, and he was. So they took him in for questioning.
He also said he was a day laborer, though. That doesn't mean he would be on their staff, does it?
Not necessarily. That's why I don't know.
That's just like picking up work there. That doesn't mean that he's...
We do find out later in like trial reports that they did learn that George had shown up to work at the salt mine, but they required him to have like a social security card to put him on payroll. So this was going to be like a real job.
Okay.
But he didn't have this on him, so he went home. And that was that. That's the only reason he wasn't there that day. That's the reason why the owner was just like, no, there's no one named George here. And he just like didn't think of this guy that came by.
And probably like fucked his whole life because the owner was like, I can't remember.
Yeah.
Great.
So they bring George in for questioning. And again, George is kind of like, well, I want to be helpful, you know.
I feel like it's going to go so bad for George.
Now, as I said, he's 19 years old. He's 5'6", and he's 140 pounds, and he has like pretty clear acne scars on his face. And he does have a low IQ. And now this is strictly an opinion, but I believe his low IQ was more due to his lack of education, because he did drop out of school after 8th grade, possibly like early high school. And his home life wasn't like great. His dad was an alcoholic, and he just wasn't like home a lot. And this is one reason why he like ended up coming up to New York to stay with like other family up here.
IQ tests were originally designed to be racist. So
exactly.
Like,
but either way, he is said to have an IQ low enough for him to seem intellectually impaired. And so one of my things is based on this case is that George isn't like, he's not slow by any means. He just might lack some of the words or some of the, like, he might just be, and also like maybe naive too.
Yeah, that's harder.
He just can't express. I feel like it's mostly that he can't express himself so much. And I read something later that because of his home life, one of the thoughts, like with like his alcoholic dad, some people were to say that he was kind of like a people pleaser, that he just wanted like things to go like easy. So anyway, through questioning, we learned that George is actually from Wildwood, New Jersey, which is what made me interested in this case to begin with.
Now I remember you talking about this. Oh, it doesn't go well for George.
He moved up to Brooklyn to live with his aunt and find work, which they also said maybe it was his mom, like his parents might have been split. Sure. Again, some of this stuff is, I got these from all newspaper reports, and it's like a little back and forth. But anyway, he had only been in the area for a few months, and he did not have consistent work. He did not know anything about the Minnie Edmonds murder, and he only knew as much as he had already told the officer about the Elba Barrero case.
Okay.
Meanwhile, Elba Barrero was brought into the precinct. She was brought into a room and asked to look through the peephole. On the other side was George, standing alone in a room. She looked through and saw a black man standing in the room. They asked if this was her attacker. And just by looks, he didn't quite fit the bill that she had said, and he didn't necessarily look familiar.
And he's a pretty specific looking guy. He's short and thin and has acne scars. That's discernible. You describe that guy.
And I think like 140 pounds to 160 pounds is pretty noticeable in like a small and tall.
Yeah, that's a thin frame for a man, for sure. Yeah. I mean, for anybody, but for a man, that's that's a very thin frame.
Yeah. So she's just like, I don't know that that's him. Like, I can't be sure. And so then the officers asked George to repeat the following. I'm going to rape you, lady. I'm going to rape you, and then I'm going to kill you. And they have him repeat this over and over again.
Oh, God.
Elba, like, breaks down.
Of course she does.
And then she's like, yeah, that's him.
Of course.
But again, they gave her no one else to look at.
That's not a lineup. That's an assassination.
So now they go even harder on George. They're just like, okay, we got our man. And they keep questioning about these crimes.
And he's probably terrified.
Yes. And at this point, they had denied him the right to leave. He had asked to leave a bunch of times. He wanted to call his girlfriend. He wanted to call anybody. He wanted to call, they wouldn't even get him counsel or anything.
That's illegal.
Like that. And they denied his request for a polygraph. He was just like, I'll take a
this is all very illegal.
So hours had gone by, hours.
Oh my God.
And after them not taking no for an answer, he just finally said yes. He was just like, they'll let me go home if I say yes to something.
Won't. This is a forced confession and I hate it.
So He says, I killed Minnie Edmonds and I attempted to rob and rape Elba Barrero.
Fuck, George. Come on. This is how the West Memphis 3 ended up in the position
this
they're
is
in
what
too.
it reminds me of.
Ugh.
Outside the interrogation room, Officer Bulger was being pretty nosy and saw a photo that had been taken from George's pockets. It was of two women in a convertible, and one of the women was more predominant in the photo, and she had blonde hair. Okay. She looked an awful lot like Janice Wylie.
Oh, so they decided he did this. Got it.
So only Bulger thought this, though. Like, he was the only person. And he would know. Like, they trusted him, though, because he worked on the Career Girls case murder for months.
Right.
He thought that, though, at this point, he was not actively working on the case anymore.
Of course not.
And if we can also remember, there's a $10,000 reward out for people that I also don't know if that's something like for him to be able to get, or maybe Elba also was told about this possible award reward that she can get.
Great.
So he decided to get in on the interrogation. He was just like, okay,
yeah,
you know
why
what?
Not?
I need to ask him about this picture.
Mm-hmm.
So, and if George had just confessed to those two crimes, because everybody in there was just like, great, we found like the killer for these two, or, there's a good chance that he might also be Janice and Emily's killer. So, and wouldn't it just
Why?
be great? Yeah, just because they sound exactly the same.
Oh, God.
They're all career women.
Sure, yeah.
So when George was asked about his whereabouts on August 28th, 1963, he knew immediately where he was. He was back in Wildwood, New Jersey at the Ivy Hotel with a bunch of his family and friends watching Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. give his I Have a Dream speech on a large black and white TV. He had a ton of people who can account for his whereabouts.
Oh, my God.
It was perfect.
Yep.
Also, something that I didn't like specifically say in here, but with this being such a high profile case, like it's Emily and Janice's murder was everywhere. And like this is months have gone by and they cannot find this killer. And this was a scary,
right. So
scary case.
They want to put someone away
at this point
to look like it's done.
Yeah. Like NYPD is not finding anybody, right? And now several other people are dying and there's all these scary little cases. Janice's father, Mr. Wylie, who is a writer, right? He puts out a book that is about like how to stay safe, like how like these career women can stay safe. So there's just all this stuff out there. It's just not safe for us working women.
It's not.
Got to stay with our husbands.
Working girls.
Mm-hmm. So, unfortunately, Officer Bulger was not going to leave that interrogation room till he had the answer he wanted. And after 22 hours of harsh questioning, they finally broke him. He confessed to everything. Ugh. Officers secured a 63-page written confession of all 3 incidences.
Oh, my God.
But I should note that some of the officers felt a little confused by George's confession. Certain things just didn't add up to them.
Yeah, because they were fake.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, this is one of those, like, the more I dug into this case, the more I realized that, and I actually liked to see it. This was, like, I feel like there was so much racism in the country then that we still see now. But there was just a small amount. It was like these few main people were racist. And a large amount of other people were really trying to help. And they just, it took a while. It's going to take a while.
Oh, God.
So it was kind of nice to see how many people were actually just like, he didn't do it.
Like what an insane way to convict someone of a crime.
So even though things weren't adding up, this confession really seemed like George knew everything that there was to know about
I'm sure
this
the
case.
Police told him.
And even Officer Bulger was just like, there's stuff that like I wasn't even aware of in the case. And then when I matched it up to like, really see what was going on, like, oh my gosh, yeah, like I didn't even know that fact, but he knew it. So like he definitely did this. And he had this photo. Like, why would he have this photo?
Was this photo of these women, or was it just of women who were blonde and the other one had glasses?
So he shows this photo to Janice's dad, Mr. Wylie, and he confirms that it is Janice and that that's actually a photo that was missing from her apartment. So like, wow, right? No, Mr. Wylie, like, did see the photo and was like, that's not my daughter.
Mm.
That is not my daughter. But this information it gets put in. Officer Bolger lies. And this information gets put in to the confession.
Oh my God. So here's a really fucked up thing. And it's something that we shouldn't do, but we do. In an interrogation in the United States, police are allowed to lie to the person they're interrogating. They're allowed to say whatever the fuck they want. And often that's the kind of thing that with someone susceptible to this kind of treatment, and often it is someone on the lower end of the IQ scale, not necessarily like someone who would have a special need or a mental difference, someone who just is more, exactly like you said, is more naive and susceptible to this kind of thing. They can confuse them. They can be like, oh God, you're saying I was there. Maybe I was there and I forgot. Did I pass out? What happened to me? And they'll like start to believe what the cops are saying. It's like false confessions are like a really crazy thing.
Yep. And again, if this was a longer episode, that would have been something I would have given you to speak on. So we'll do it in another one.
There you go. There's plenty.
So now George has 3 trials that he has to get ready for. But luckily, he is now finally given a lawyer who immediately is like, excuse me, this can't be real.
I hope the lawyer did walk in and go, no, we got to go back, buddy. This is all illegal.
This is wild. So the confession was clearly written for him. There is zero hard evidence to claim that it was him in any of these cases. And there is no reason why this little man, or there's no way that this little man could have pulled off all these crimes in the manner that they were described. He was like, this kid, there's no way that he can just like break these knives. There's no way that like compared to these women, like what he was able to accomplish is like to them, which that can sometimes be harder to prove, because people be crazy, but
they do be crazy.
They do be crazy. But there were just other things like that just did not add up. And also there's a ton of witnesses that have him in Wildwood, New Jersey most of this time.
Oh my God, I hate this.
There's also a button that came from a jacket that was not his.
Oh, okay.
It didn't match the fibers on the coat that he was wearing.
And they found this button in the crime scene? Like with
remember,
the girls?
Elba ripped that button off the coat,
All right?
And her description and the original officer's description doesn't sound like it's him. Like, so nothing is adding up to anybody. But during his trial for Elba Barrero, a Brooklyn jury convicted George on the charges of attempted rape. They were just like, yeah, he did it. But the verdict was overturned when jurors were found to have been reading the newspaper accounts on the case in which George was called the prime suspect in the Career Girl murders. And he was tried for a second. So basically, like, that Career Girl murders was such a high profile case. And now they're just like, oh, we may have found the person. And it's this guy, George Whitmore Jr. And the judge was like, okay, this is going to be really hard to get, like, biased people, like biased jurors. And it was already hard enough for them to try to find people that might not be racist. But then to also find people that
had never heard of it,
had never heard of the case, or like didn't really know about this. But so they were told, you are not allowed, like, even if you have read something, which at this point, stop reading all articles.
Sure.
But you are not allowed to talk to each other about the case at all.
They should have moved the trial. Trial should have been in a different city or something.
They should have. But they were just like, you promise? And they said, we promise.
No, nobody's doing that.
Exactly. And so that was found out, the lawyer did his due diligence and was able to figure out that, like, no, these jurors were talking this whole time and they're convinced that he's the killer of these 2 other women. So they're like, regardless of what the evidence is here, they're just going to be like, yeah, this man needs to be put in jail.
They already made up their mind, yeah.
And it was also very clear that a handful of them were like definitely racist because of their comments that they were making. So that trial was, what do they call that? Like, it was like a mistrial, right?
Yeah.
And he was tried a second time and he was convicted again, but they threw that out too on like different grounds because I think they still just like couldn't get people to like keep their mouth shut.
Prosecutor too, like, come on.
So then while they were getting ready for Janice and Emily's trial, something big happened.
Okay.
On October 9th, 1964, and this is going to be like a little bit of a wiki rundown, right? Nathan Jimmy Delaney who was 35 and the biggest drug dealer in town, was arrested for the murder of a rival drug dealer, Roberto Cruz Del Valle.
Mm.
Facing the death penalty, Delaney offered to make a deal. In return for leniency, he would give police the name of the real Career Girls killer, and he claimed it was not George Whitmore Jr.
I hope he's right.
So Delaney explained to the police that on the day of the killings that he had met an old acquaintance, Richard Ricky Robles, who had told him that he had committed the murders of Janice and Emily. And Ricky, a 22-year-old burglar, had a long record of drug use. He was like a heroin user and had been released from prison 2 months prior to those murders. He actually was on the initial suspect list for Janice and Emily. And he was clear due to an alibi corroborated by his mother.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mothers never lie for their sons.
But he was like pretty hardly, he was like looked into because he was known to burglarize right around that area.
Okay.
So Delaney told detectives that Ricky had turned up at his apartment on the day of the killings, demanding drugs while his hands and clothes were covered in blood.
Ooh.
The shaken Ricky told Delaney that, "I just iced 2 dames." And his clothes had blood splatters all over them. Delaney gave him a shirt and had a pair of pants for him to change into. Delaney said he then went out to buy more drugs with money that Ricky had given him. So at this point, they're just like, okay, but we need to get some like proof. Like, is this really what
you could
it
be
is?
telling any kind of story.
Exactly.
You could hate this guy.
And Delaney is like, he does give some pretty hard details that they're just like, this could be something. And we did really look into this guy. And also, we know that George is innocent.
We just really needed someone to take the fall for this, and he couldn't protest.
And so they were like, okay, let's, we're going to keep some of this from the papers because we don't want this to be like a fiasco.
Because we still want to convict this other guy.
Yeah, but we need to get some like hard evidence. Yeah. And so they basically, this is what I think is really wild in the case. So they have Delaney and his wife like try to get Ricky to confess like via like,
hey, tell me about them dames.
Yeah. But in order to do it, they were just like, well, we got to like keep our friendship and stuff like that. So like they're basically, they keep inviting him over to do like heroin and they just like talk about stuff. And this goes on for like a while.
Oh,
like
God.
They get little bits of things. And then finally they're just like, okay, we need to like speed this process up because.
This just sounds like you want to keep hanging out with your friend and not go to jail.
Yeah. It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
But basically like, it gets out that they have this big suspect that they really think is they really think is the killer. But George is still he still has a trial date.
Just sitting in jail.
There are people that are like, guys, why haven't we cleared him yet? You have this other person and we just need to get him arrested. Like, what is taking so long? Like, you could arrest him at any point right now.
Yeah.
And they're just like, no, we're just going to like let this keep going. Well, anyway, they finally get enough information on the surveillance that allows them to bring in Ricky. And he does tell enough details that convince all the investigators that he's the real killer. And he was arrested on the charge on January 26, 1965. Meanwhile, George still had a trial date for the murder and rape of Minnie Edmonds.
Oh, my God.
So again, but luckily, and not without a lot of trouble to get this, his 63-page confession was completely thrown out due to it just being an entire load of shit. Well, but it's just wild that it took forever. Like, they convicted this other man.
Yep.
And his whole confession is all looped together.
Yep.
And once they, like, realized that he wasn't the killer for one thing, he should have just been dropped.
Yeah. Yeah. They just wanted to put this man in jail.
I know.
For, like, whatever reason.
Yeah. So no charges were pressed against the police officers who obtained George's confessions.
Oh, of course not.
And he was in jail for 1,216 days. That's how long this innocent man was in jail for.
Oh, my God.
Wild.
Oh, my God. That is years.
And, okay, so for when they convict Ricky and his confession, it's, like, very gruesome, really similar to what I read, right? Like, what he did. But he does claim that he did actually go through that open window because he he's like a ninja with his like heroin, like infused
drug
vape.
strength.
He's like, but he like scaled the building to get into the open window. Yeah. And he's been in there before, so we knew how to like kind of where to get out.
Really wanted to get in.
He really wanted to get in. Yeah.
3 floors? I couldn't even use the fire escapes.
No, there was no fire escape.
Not. I'm not climbing up the side. What am I, Spider-Man?
Yes.
No. How is that not their first thought? It was Spider-Man.
Oh, and when he got in there, so he ended up killing the girls because he wanted to just rob the place.
Right.
But then at the time, Janice was the only one home and she was getting ready for work. And so she had gotten out of the shower. She was naked and she like runs into him, like going through things in the house. And then he's just like, ah. So he like knocks her over the head. And then he's like, she's naked. All right, I'll have some sex with her.
God.
Awful. And so then he sexually assaults her. That's where the Noxzema cream comes into play.
Oh.
Yeah. And then...
gross.
Yes, it's awful. He already, like, he uses the razor blades to strip the sheets to, like, tie her up.
Yeah.
And then while he's doing that, Emily comes home. So she dropped off the car and was like, I'm going to come back first before I go to a lunch date because someone else was waiting for her too that they didn't have. So she comes in and she was just like, oh my gosh. And so he tries to knock her over the head. She's not fully unconscious. So when he like ties her up, brings her into the room, she wakes up and then says like, I see your face. I know who you are. Like, I'm going to like tell the cops.
Okay.
And that's when he was like, well, now I got to kill them because...
He also killed them in the angriest way possible. Like,
yes, he did. So he definitely at this point is either coming down for like, he is either like itching for something. Because that's one reason why he was like robbing the place because he was trying to find money.
Okay.
He also, because he didn't take, I think he took like $35 or something. Like he just took money. He didn't take anything from the apartment.
Right. So they wouldn't have assumed robbery gone wrong right away because it wasn't like everything was missing.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's really sad to me because I don't know if she would have stayed quiet if they'd still be alive or if like either way it wasn't going to be good, you know?
Yeah, I think that this guy was just going to do what he was going to do.
I know.
So like if you are a youth and you don't know what Noxzema is, it is a cold cream, a cream used to like wash your face and take off makeup, but it is full of, it tingles really bad. It tingles and numbs almost. It's like putting after sun on you. In fact, people use Noxzema as an after sun product because it is so like lidocaine-like and cooling. There's a lot of eucalyptus or something in it. That is not a good thing to put on anybody's downstairs parts ever.
No.
Not his either. So I'm like, what?
Right.
Why?
I think luckily it didn't help the situation.
It couldn't have.
Still is just awful.
It's extremely awful. Yeah. But the thing that gets me on that one fact is that it was awful for him too.
Yes.
So like that is also unpleasant for you.
Mm-hmm. Ugh.
Yeah.
So Ricky was, sentenced to at this point he would have been on death row, but then they abolished that. So, but he is sentenced to like
4 million years in jail.
Yeah, basically
back to back.
Like double life sentence he has. He did do a confession. So initially, obviously they have like tapes of him confessing, but then when he is brought into the precinct, he is said to have confessed, but it was to one officer and it wasn't recorded. So then when they finally did it more legalized, he said he was innocent and he didn't do any of this.
That one confession they didn't record. But they have a 65-page confession written down from a guy that didn't do it.
Exactly.
Are you fucking kidding me?
So then, so he maintains his innocence, but he is found guilty. And then in like the 1980s, he is up for parole for whatever fucking reason. And then, but then he does end up confessing and like says what he did. And then they were just like, okay, you can go back to jail now.
Bye. You can go right back.
You can go right back in. So what is interesting about this case specifically is that Whitmore and his treatment by the police was one of many examples used by the U.S. Supreme Court when it issued the guidelines known as the Miranda rights in June 1966, by which when a defendant is taken into custody and accused of a crime, he must be advised of his constitutional rights.
Oh, I wasn't even thinking that he wasn't read his Miranda rights. That's interesting.
Yeah. Which is why he didn't know that he could specifically ask or just leave. Or he didn't know he could have just left.
You're allowed to not talk, you're allowed to leave, and you should have a lawyer. And they don't. Okay.
The court acknowledged that coercive interrogations could produce false confessions, and in a footnote stated, the most conspicuous example occurred in New York in 1964 when a Negro of limited intelligence confessed to 2 brutal murders and a rape which he had not committed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did we ever find who was guilty for Minnie's crime?
No. So, no.
Oh my God.
I mean, it's so hard. So that one was really hard to prove.
Sure.
It could have been him. It could have been Ricky.
Yeah, I guess.
Still.
Wow.
But there was a lot of people on the streets at that point.
Sure. And I'm sure they didn't really put a conscious effort into that at that point.
Yeah.
They probably didn't give a shit.
So Janice's dad, Max, he did lead like a fairly full life, like with his career. Okay. And she did have an older sister. So he had another girl to kind of be with. But he did find all of this to be too much for him. Okay. And he died by suicide in 1975.
He should be like another victim of this guy.
Yeah. So as for George, he, after he was finally acquitted of everything, he moved back to Wildwood, New Jersey, where he spent the rest of his days. He did have children. He never married, but and he also won $500,000 in a lawsuit against the NYPD, and but he did spend it fairly quickly, which he could do whatever he wants at this point. Life. And then he was put into a nursing home where he died at the age of 68. But he did have a loving family who said that he didn't really talk about what had happened to him, and he tried to keep pretty good spirits, and they loved him. So he didn't die alone, which is
poor guy though.
That's really sad. He was in jail for way too long. They just held him there with just knowing years. All this information. It was just kind of they just didn't care. They just didn't want to be proved wrong or looked at they didn't know what they were doing.
I think they also, that's definitely true 100%. I think another side of that coin is that they needed a fallback plan. Well, if this guy, we can't prove it's this guy, we still have the other one in jail.
Yeah.
And no matter what, it looks like we've solved this case and people won't be paranoid about somebody murdering women on the street.
There were so many people when they saw him do his confession that were really connected to this case were just this kid didn't do it. And one of them was Janice's uncle, Philip Wylie, who was a famous novelist, actually. And he immediately was just he was either coerced or this guy is trying to I don't know, make a name for himself. He's bored.
Oh my God.
He was
brutal.
But he didn't do this.
That is brutal.
Yeah.
It is similar to, I think Jesse Miss Kelly is the West Memphis 3. The one of the 3 who they got to confess to all of them. And listening to that is very difficult because he very clearly just doesn't, he gets so confused and turned around and ends up saying things that he probably wouldn't say. And he's also someone who I think it is indicated that he was a little compromised.
Yeah.
I don't know. We haven't covered that case because I was fucking traumatized by the Robin Hood Hills documentaries. By Paradise Lost is what they're called. They are so hard to watch, and those little boys' bodies are just on the screen all of the time. It is.
I know. It's so hard.
So we haven't covered that case for that reason.
Yeah.
However, I am familiar with it, and this reminds me so much of that coercive interview.
Yeah. They did, it was the police stated that he was never physically harmed, but that definitely wasn't true. They basically, as he was confessing, every time he was I'm innocent, they would smack him.
Of course they did.
And when he did do his confession, the way it was basically written, and they found the recordings of it, and it's the police asking him yes or no questions.
So he didn't say any of that. He just knew he had to answer in the affirmative. Yeah. Oh my God.
Oh, and the picture that he had in his pocket was of like it was very, very quickly found that they were just girls from like back home, like high school friends.
They were like his friends.
Yeah, and he like found this picture. His dad owned like a junkyard that he worked at, and he like found the picture like on the floor and just kept it, and it was just
Oh my God.
I know.
That's really frustrating.
Toast?
Yeah. Obviously to George.
Yes.
Who did not deserve anything that he got.
No.
That's really upsetting. No.
He just like had no record of anything either. Like he had a clean record.
They just wanted anybody, and they were probably super I mean, like, here's the thing. If you want to compare this to the West Memphis 3, at the time when that case happened, the Satanic Panic was a huge deal. Yeah. So they saw these kids and went, it's got to be the goth kid and his friends. It's got to be these kids because they're like playing D&D, and that's who we want to blame everything on right now. We want them to be the ones. People believe that. We're going to hop on this trend. Mm-hmm. And you're talking about right at a point in time when like civil rights was a thing, but everybody still had opinions. There were still people that were extremely racist, and people who were just like walking around on the streets in everyday life talking about it.
Right.
They
and
still
also
do, but you know.
It's really unsafe for women to get jobs and be on their own.
Yeah. You gotta watch out for those black guys. They could come and rape you and kill you in your apartment. And I'm sure that was a narrative. They knew. They knew they could say, oh, it was this black man. Yeah. And people would be like, it was that black man. And they'd be like, we've done a thing. Everybody believes it. And everybody gets to keep their wrong opinions, and we'll just move on. It's very, in that regard, to me, it feels very similar.
For sure.
I kept thinking, throw it on a pile that people like to be mad at.
Well, and George really reminded me of I feel bad. I don't remember.
I think it was Jesse Miss Kelly.
Yeah, that's the kid in
the West Memphis 3. Mm-hmm. If I get his name wrong, I'll tell John to edit.
And that's actually who I was picturing, because I watched the made for TV like documentary what is it like?
Was it like a movie?
It was like a movie, right? On
the HBO one, the Paradise Lost documentary. That one is, oh God, that was TV, but that was cable.
Yeah, I don't remember.
If it wasn't super graphic, then it was something else. Because it
was like recent. It was like a show.
Oh, I don't know. No, the HBO documentary.
I think you couldn't watch it. I think that's why you were like, I couldn't watch it.
I absolutely can't. I can't. Like, that case is one case. And I know I've gone back on cases I said I wasn't going to cover because with time and perspective, I felt they were important. Mm-hmm. But that case bothers me too. I can't. It like haunts me. I can't. I can never go back and watch that documentary again. I will never again. And because of that documentary, the photos of those boys dead are so ubiquitous and easy to get a hold of.
I'm thinking of a very different case.
Oh, okay.
I'm thinking of the one where they were boys that were sentenced for raping.
Oh, the Central Park one?
The Central Park.
That's different. That one's terrible too.
That's the one I was thinking of the whole time.
Oh, that one's fucking terrible too.
Yeah.
I don't have as much working knowledge of the like interviews on that case. Mm-hmm. And that's another racism one. It's awful. I don't do well with like Innocence Project cases. They make me so angry.
They're so sad.
They're really sad. And that's the kids that they put in jail for a long ass time for not doing anything because this jogger woman was like, it was definitely them. They were also kids. They were young. Kids. They were children. So it's like wild that they did that. One had like a school backpack on. I can't.
Just awful.
Yeah, it's just really awful. Anyway, toast to God.
Okay.
The people, George, the family member who was like the Janice's family member who was an author and was like, no.
Oh,
he didn't
Philip Wylie.
Yeah, that was pretty, and that's his like family member that died, and he was still saying, no, get this innocent man out of jail. Yeah. So that's way to be.
Yeah. And well, into Janice, Patricia, and
Minnie.
And Emily, and Minnie, and Elba.
God damn.
I don't know. Well, Elba shouldn't have been attacked. But.
True. True to all of them. They didn't deserve any of that.
I think she was coerced into saying that.
Oh, I'm sure.
George.
They traumatized the shit out of her.
She did come in. She does specifically say that. Like she tells the like when she is interrogated herself, like, or not interrogated, but questioned on the stand. Yeah. Like she tells them, like, this is what he was the only person in the room. Like,
yeah,
they may have talked about like a reward. Like there was just a lot of stuff happening, and I had just been attacked.
Yeah, I mean, that's very overwhelming. I'm not going to say it isn't. And also, there's got to be...
I think she was like 20. She was like young.
And there's got to be a tiny part of your brain after you're like attacked in the street that is like, I want to believe you've caught this person.
Yeah.
I want to believe this is over for me and that justice has happened and I can just go home and go to bed.
Yeah. Wild.
Yeah.
So if we scaled 3 floors of a New York City apartment, we would be dead.
Thank you for listening to the We Would Be Dead podcast. Hit subscribe now to never miss an episode. Rate and review our show on iTunes. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Would Be Dead Pod. And join our Facebook group to discuss the podcast and more.
Three floors? I couldn't even use the fire escapes.
No, there was no fire escape.
Not. I'm not climbing up the side. What am I, Spider-Man?
Yes.
No.